Hello. So today I'm going to talk about some of the more common misconceptions about life in Europe. So people who are interested to move to Europe for studies, for work, you will find this video useful. Okay, so I have been living in Europe for over a decade now. So I moved to Europe back in 2015, so it's exactly 10 years I have been living here in Europe. So I do have experience of living in two different countries in Europe. I have traveled across many countries in Europe, but I've lived and worked in two countries, UK and the Netherlands. And I would like to share my views about some of the misconceptions people have about life in Europe. Now, this is based on my own experience of talking to people. I have friends and family members having misconceptions about Europe. So I thought of making a video on that. I think people who are interested in Europe, I think they must know actually these misconceptions and not to be misguided before making a decision. First one is the salaries. Actually, there's a misconception that the salaries in the US and the Europe, they're exactly the same. They're more or less on the same level. That's actually not true. The salaries in the US in some professions can be significantly higher compared to that in Europe. So this misconception is quite normal because people think that okay, it's all Western, right? Whether it's the US or Canada or the European countries, we call them Western countries. So the salaries are very similar in the Western countries, but that's actually not true. As a finance professional, you'll be making much higher in New York compared to in Amsterdam or in Frankfurt in Paris. Okay, so that's first thing. Second misconception is that there's a misconception that the people simply don't speak English. That's actually not true. In Netherlands, I think 95% of the people can speak some English. I think most people can speak quite decent English. The level of English in Netherlands is actually pretty good. In fact, among the non-English speaking countries in Netherlands, people in Netherlands speak the best English among the non-English speaking countries. So in most part of Europe, you will see people, reasonably comfortable with the English language. So when you travel across Europe, that's not a problem at all. But when you want to make a career, actually, that's a different thing. There are many jobs. There are many, companies who simply are not willing to hire people who can't speak the local language, right? But traveling is not an issue at all. I think wherever you go in Europe, I think you will find people. I think most people can speak and write and understand English, so that's not a problem at all. Social life is quite okay, as long as you're comfortable with English, you can have a quite good social life. But in terms of job opportunities, especially in some of the European countries, you will find it difficult if you do not know the local language. And even if you know the local language, you have to know at a level that is considered pretty good, pretty native, right? If you know a language, at A2 C1 level, or sorry, A2 or B1 level, I think that's not considered good enough in most part of Europe. So you have to know at a very, very top level like B2 or even C1, C2 level in order to be considered for some of the positions. So the misconception here is that people simply don't speak or know English. That's not actually true. Some people have this conception that okay, the weather is too bad. It's not entirely true. It depends on which part of Europe. In some parts of Europe, the weather can be very, very good, but in some other parts of Europe, I think weather can be bad, right? So it entirely depends on which country in Europe you're living in. If you're living in Greece or in Spain, or even in Italy and some other places, I think weather can be okay, but in some other locations such as Netherlands, weather can be uh, not so great. Having said that, let me tell you that the winter is not so bad in Western Europe compared to, let's say, some parts of US or Canada or the Scandinavian countries. So that's also something to note, because people think that okay, the weather in entire Europe is as bad as, let's say, the weather in Canada or the weather in Nordic countries. That's actually not true. In many parts of Europe, you can have pleasant weather. Even in Netherlands, where I live, where people complain about weather, I mean, the winter is not too bad. The problem here is that it rains all the time. Like, I think about 180 or 180 or 90 days in a year, uh, there is rain, and that is a bigger problem compared to the winter or the temperature. So this is one other misconception, right? And there's another misconception, which is that the it's difficult to make friends in Europe. Well, actually, a bit subjective. It's entirely up to you. Actually, if you make efforts to make friends, and I think it's quite possible anywhere in the world. It doesn't have to be in Europe, but anywhere in the world, if you want friends, you have to make efforts. After certain age, it's difficult to make friends because most of your friends are from school or college, universities, right? After that, it's difficult to make close friends, and certainly true anywhere in the world, and not necessarily just a thing in Europe. In Europe, if you make efforts, you can also have good friends. There's a misconception that it's very difficult to break into European societies. That's far from being true, at least in my experience. That's not entirely right. Um, there is a misconception that um, yeah, that I mean, you will save a lot of money quickly, and that's also not true because the taxes are very high in Europe. So you have to take into account the taxes and the kind of taxes that you will be paying in Europe. So that can be very very high. There's a misconception that, and many people might disagree with that the social security is just insanely good, that you don't have to worry about anything else in life. That's a bit subjective. What really matters to you may not matter to other people, right? So social security, no doubt, is quite amazing compared to many other countries, but for some people, social security uh, is not necessarily a very great thing. Social security is a very interesting topic, right? It's like, you contribute something for your future. It's more of an insurance policy. It doesn't come free. Certainly not come free. It's very expensive, and you pay for that. And if you are making above average salary, right? In Europe, above average salary is like above 100,000 euro. If you make that kind of salary, then you are contributing more for social security than the poor people, and you may not receive that kind of, you know you may not receive a lot for the money that you are paying for. So so the European society is a bit more socialistic type compared to, let's say, Europe, Canada, or UK, or US. Well, UK is also somewhat, or rather, European in many ways. Uh, so these are some of the misconceptions. Career-wise, there are some misconception. Uh, I was talking to a friend of mine who was saying that whether it's in the US or in Europe, you face challenges moving up in your career. But that's true everywhere in the world, right? As you move up, the competition becomes much higher over time, and then you face the challenge of being, you know, stuck at one place. That's a challenge everywhere. One other misconception is that people think that you can move from one country to the other for your career purpose. That's actually easier said than done. I haven't met many people who have changed jobs from Netherlands to Germany, Germany to France, France to Italy, Italy to Spain. I know. In US, that's quite possible. You move from California to New York, New York to Texas, or in Canada, that's quite possible. But here in Europe, you can't move that easily from Amsterdam to Paris, Paris to. I mean, there's nothing, no problem with the visa restriction or all of that, but it's just that the work culture is so different that it's not always easy to find a job in Paris from Amsterdam or in Frankfurt from Amsterdam. So that's not impossible, but I haven't seen many examples of that happening. Okay, so these are some of the misconceptions about life in Europe. There are actually many more, to be honest. There are some of the things which I can't even talk about here on this channel, but I've heard many funny misconceptions from people. And in fact, I had some before coming over to Europe, because I've read quite a bit on different platforms such as Quora and Reddit about European life. Some of the things that I read turned out to be not true when I actually experienced life here in Europe. If you have any questions about life in general in Europe, let me know. Let me know in the comment. Thanks, guys.